And we are live. Welcome to Olivia's Stories, ladies and gentlemen. Story number 1.
My bride-to-be was cheating on me when we were supposed to be getting married. As a person who prides myself in perfection, I had never imagined finding myself in this situation. She had been sharing her bed with other men while I was preparing my mind for a wedding. The discovering that my wife-to-be of 6 months was cheating on me had almost weighed me down. But luckily for me, I wasn't a fool that believed in love, and I saw women for what they always were: liars. However, I had thought that I had everything about this woman figured out. Heck, that's why I had proposed. Not because of love or anything weird like emotions. I had also thought I had absolute control when it came to my relationship with her. But she goes and proves me right. I say right because I have never been wrong. I guess I could say I always expected this. Expected there to be a hitch in my relationship with women. Trust me, it began from when I was little. I was made to never rely on a woman's word because, as I said before, they were all liars. I had only decided to marry my fiancée because she seemed a tad bit different from the rest. Emphasis on tad bit. And I really thought she couldn't get the best of me. I should have trusted my instincts. Women were one and truly the same, and my friends had laughed their asses off when I had told them of my problem. So I have come to you Redditors for a solution. My wife-to-be was a hardcore career woman, a seasoned businesswoman whose 80% of her business transactions involved traveling and meeting people from all walks of life. This could sometimes take the whole weekdays, leaving her with only weekends for other things. I had advised her shortly after I had proposed to stop her work, as I was well-to-do and could take care of her. This she had strongly refused, always claiming to be an independent lady. Mind you, that's not how I met her when we started dating. I hate not being in control, and I told her to quit, but now I see the reason why she had refused to leave her job. That's because she was sharing another man's bed under the pretext of traveling for business. I had no idea how I had never looked into whatever she was doing. I had overlooked because I had thought everything was going well. Our wedding plans were already underway, and she goes ahead to do that. Can you imagine the audacity of women? They're all the same, professing their undying love and devotion and accepting your ring 1 minute, then sharing another man's bed the next. Just like I had said earlier, weekends are the only time available for us to see and continue our wedding plans. She had accepted her job once we had started discussing about getting married. I hadn't thought much of a to-be-wedded couple not spending time together. I mean, we had the rest of our lives to spend together, so I hadn't protested her job at first. But when it became something she carried on her head always, I began to complain. I am a man, of course. I have needs. Needs she was supposed to be satisfying, but she had taken it upon herself to become Forbes' most independent fiancé, coming up with excuses left and right. Stupid excuses now that I think about them. Terribly stupid excuses that I should have seen right through. When did I begin to notice something was off about her attitude? The day we were supposed to go cake tasting, and then she called to say she won't be able to make it back from wherever her work had taken her. This woman had slied me, and she had sounded breathless while at it, like she had just finished tumbling in the sheets or she was getting ready to begin. And I had taken it at that moment. That's what irks me. I hadn't demanded that she come home immediately. I had just said okay and thought of way to reschedule cake tasting. It's like our positions had switched, and I was the one with the apron around my neck, baking cookies and rescheduling cake tasting. She was undermining my mojo. Well, I wouldn't have even come to this realization that something was off if not for the signs, the various signs. After that incident, I began to take note of the signs, although not consciously, but at the back of my head. I was storing them there. We always spent most weekends together when she was done traveling around the world. On some days, it seemed like her facade would slip and she'll start giving me attitude. From talking back at me to replying me under her breath to thinking she ought to have a say in everything. It was like she was changing overnight and her true colors were beginning to show. It seemed the man she was sharing her bed with was giving her some courage. If not for the signs, I would have never given it a place in my heart to suspect that my wife-to-be was cheating on me. So I decided to look into it. But before I go into that, let me tell you a little bit of myself and how I had met my fiancée and got up to the stage of proposing. My name is Steve. I am 31 years old, 6 foot 5 inches tall, heavily built and athletic, handsome and easily attract the opposite sex. I'm not bragging, this is just who I am. And it takes an assertive man, someone who knows who they are and what they want, to be able to conquer the world. I hold shares with top IT company in the States, and I'm building a startup. My life may sound novel and one for the books, but I'm simply an ambitious and confident man. My fiance's name is Nuella, and she's 28 years old. I met my wife to be at a mutual friend's get-together party. I'll say what had attracted me to her was that out of the 10 pretty women that were at the party, she was among the 3 that didn't flaunt herself in front of me. Given that the other 2 were already married, she was the only one that didn't light up like she had seen a money bag when she saw me. And the fact that she was also beautiful too. Those were the things that drew me to her. She ticked all the boxes of a beautiful woman. Hair, eyes, chin, stature, and she carried herself with this elegant grace. She was the price at the party, and she knew it. This is why I and the other men at the party were attracted to her, but like attracts like, and she found her way to me. After that, we began to see more of each other at various events. We ran in the same groups, it had seemed. She was friends with my friends, so of course my friends matched us. Every party I was invited to, she was somehow there. And every party she was invited to, my friends made sure I was there too. I got to know she was in her 3rd year in college at Florida State University studying business administration. So not only was she pretty, she was also smart and respectful of my every decision during the few times we hung out. At the time, she was 24 and I was 27, and not getting any younger according to my mother, who had been hassling me at that time to enter a serious relationship. Well, that's how I and Nuella started dating. During our dating days, we were known as the power couple among our friends. I hadn't began dating my fiancé because of love, and she knew. That's why we made the power couple. There wasn't some sappy emotion getting in the way of our goals. I wanted a relationship and could provide. She also wanted a relationship and needed someone that could provide. The cherry on top? She was obedient and never questioned my decisions. So I made sure she was well cared for while we were dating. During her graduation 2 years later, I attended alongside her parents, and that's when I proposed. While we were having dinner at my home in front of her family and our mutual friends, I popped out a ring. No, I didn't kneel because that would have been degrading of my character, but I asked in the most polite manner. Her parents were there after all. I didn't want them to think their daughter would be marrying someone who couldn't care for her. Most of my friends had thought I had gone and fallen in love. They had termed it the unemotional Steve gains his first emotion, but they didn't know I wasn't proposing out of love, but out of a sense of responsibility for my family. I hadn't really cared for the emotion love. I still don't, by the way. Imagine what state I would have been in if I had been in love and she cheated on me. Lol, I would probably have keeled over like a weak man with a 70-plus heart. Well, after I had proposed, that's when my fiancé went and accepted the job offer that set about this chain of terrible events. The day she had accepted the job, she had seemed so pleased and couldn't wait to start despite my warnings about her discarding the job. According to her, the job was the first real thing she had ever gotten from her hard work and sweat, and she would just test the waters with it. As someone who loves control, I should probably have dismissed any talks of her accepting the job then and there, but she was a person and had the right to choose for herself, so I let her. I thought that after testing the waters and seeing how harsh the employment world was, she would quit after 2 weeks, but it seems she was enjoying her freedom even more because after 6 months of testing the waters, she had the audacity to test other men in her bed. The little witch. Enough of the background story and on to how I had caught my fiancé cheating on me on one of her business trips. I hate being played for a fool, but my fiancé played me like a violin expert. Like I had told you all earlier, I began noticing some signs that something was off. The prolonged work trips, the distancing, the attitude, everything was as clear as daylight. So like I said, I had to look into it to see if it was just me being overbearing. She was slowly turning me into a nagging person. Luckily, I came across an old college friend of mine. We used to see each other in the library almost at the same time, so from there we had become study buddies, although we didn't have the same majors. Anyway, we had lost contact since we had graduated, and I just happened to bump into him during one of my stops at Starbucks to get a coffee. Turned out he was a private investigator now, and I teased about our college days. We began meeting up often, and I thought that maybe he could help me with my problems. I told him about my concerns about my fiancée and told him all about how her business trips were becoming suspicious. He gave me a simple test to carry out on her anytime I had the opportunity to do so. The opportunity to test out what he had told me came about a month later. During one of the weekends my fiancée deemed it fit to come back from her business trips, the test naturally took place even without my planning it. She had left her handset in the sitting room when it rang. I wanted to get her the device when she appeared from the door, and with the phone in my hand told me that I had no right to sneak through her things and what had happened to her privacy. This was someone I was supposed to marry in 3 weeks. My fiancé had the audacity to say I was doing too much in our relationship. This was also the same person who always agreed to everything I do and respected my decisions. In her own words, my domineering control was beginning to get to her in our relationship, and it was becoming annoying. She even threatened to take a walk out of the marriage if I continued to behave like that and literally stomped out of the room. I mean, she had stomped her feet out of the room in a tantrum like a toddler, just because I had wanted to hand over her phone that was ringing. I hadn't even gotten a look at who was calling because she had snatched it out of my hands like a guilty witch. To say that I was shocked stupid by my fiancé's outburst would be stating the obvious. In fact, I was dazed and left at a loss for words. Even now, as I recall the events, I can still feel the shock traveling up my spine. For the first time in my life since I had become old enough to know right from wrong, a woman had gotten the best of me. Do you know what was even worse? She claimed I had behaved weirdly, and as a result decided to stay away for a week. She stayed away from me for a week. No calls, no texts, not even a bird with a note. It was in that week, as I replayed the events that had led up to it, to come to the conclusion that she was cheating on me. It was as obvious as a slap on my cheek. And that's how I had felt. Like I had been slapped. I just had to prove that she was cheating. The only way I could do that and be sure was to enlist the help of someone I trusted, and who better than the person who had made me see clearly. I couldn't trust my other friends with this news because they all probably thought I was happily in love. Heck, my wedding was supposedly to be in 2 weeks. Well, there wasn't going to be a wedding after all. I called my old college friend and we met up at our usual spot. Then I told him all the events that had happened, from how the phone test's opportunity had fallen into my lap and the reactions I got from my cheating fiancée after. I even told him how she didn't even speak to me for a whole week because of that. That was how I hired my friend to trail my fiancée on her business trip a week before our supposed wedding week. Of course, she didn't know there wasn't going to be any wedding longer, although I'm sure she was hoping on that. How could someone cut off a person they were supposed to be getting married to for a whole week before the wedding? How could someone even be okay with going away for week-long trips when she was about to get married? Well, I finally knew the answers. She was okay with it because whoever she was, Gudasi was worth it, and I was just a worthless piece of trash who gave her a ring on her finger. At the end of the week, it was established beyond all doubt that my fiancé was cheating on me. And do you all want to guess with who? I couldn't believe it myself when I was told. It turned out she was having all those weekdays and weekend trysts with her first love, whom she happened to meet in another town during one of her numerous travels. According to my PI friend, my fiancé had a lover right from her college days before we started dating. At least it hadn't been right underneath my nose. That would have made me more madder than I already was. My PI friend dropped evidence to attest to my wife to B's movement with her lover that included pictures of them in romantic outing in a beach, flocking together in hotels. My friend even pulled evidence of extracted text and video messages between my cheating fiancé and her lover in the past 3 months. The text that she had been so jumpy for me to see was right on my fingertips, and my anger was hot enough to prepare popcorn. To say I was beyond livid was an understatement. I hated being played above anything else, and she had the audacity to pretend. Growing up with 4 brothers was a big eye-opener to me. As young boys, no day passes without competitions amongst us in trying to prove who is more masculine. This continued on, and as a result grew into a competition will be more attractive to the opposite sex. One constant and recurring factor then was that I always beat them all. I could never be played. I prided myself in always being ahead of my peers, and now a woman had managed to play me. My fiancée was the only woman who I had allowed close to my heart. I didn't trust women in general, as I had stated earlier, and now I had finally let someone in, and she goes ahead to play me like a toy. One thing was for certain: she wasn't going to get away with it. I wasn't going to sit still and watch her play me for a fool. This was what she was going to continue with when we got married, or it seemed she was planning to jilt me at the altar, because I couldn't even begin to understand how she planned on continuing her charade and how long she planned to continue it. Well, one thing was for certain: I was still going to go ahead with the wedding. Everything was already in place: the cake, the food, the venue. Stopping the wedding now would be an embarrassment to my name, and the person I wanted to shame was my cheating fiancé. And besides, I hated to waste money. Our wedding day came, and I confirmed that my fiancé didn't plan to jilt me at the altar. In fact, she had seemed excited for the wedding, if the events of the past week were anything to judge by. She had come home and began to act all loving and sweet, agreeing with everything I said, doing her wifely duties. She had even gotten me a gift to celebrate our coming nuptials. Lol. If only she knew what was coming to her. There would be no wedding. I was going to make sure that she would regret ever deciding to cheat on me. The priest began to recite the vows and asked my fiancée to repeat after him. She happily said her vows, even having the mind to look me in the eye with emotion and say how much she loved me and how she couldn't wait to spend the rest of her life with me. All lies. The way she lied so perfectly well was something that colleges needed to put on as one of the courses to be studied. So smooth, with no hitch or even loss of eye contact. When it came to my turn, I kept silent as the priest began to recite the vows, and the murmurs began immediately. You all should have seen as the color bleached from my fiancé's face. She had turned ghost white behind pounds of makeup that had been caked into her face. The priest began the vows again, his face confused, and I still kept silent. When the priest stopped trying, I took the mic from him and announced that there will be no wedding, but my guests were free to enjoy the food and the premium entertainment in the reception hall. It was comical watching the look on my cheating fiancé's face. The real disgrace hadn't even begun. I scanned through the crowd, and as expected, she dared invite her lover to come be witness her wedding. Well, less work for me trying to find the man. I walked away with my fiancé standing at the altar and left. Update 2. Hi Redditors. I know most of you have been wondering what happened next after I found out my fiancé was cheating on me and left her at the altar, and if she had tried to get in contact with me. A lot of you were probably wondering if I had confronted her or what I had done. This is a follow-up update on my experience with my cheating fiancé. After I jilted her at the altar with no reason, I had blocked her and every of my friend and went about my business for a year. I guess you could say I gave her breathing space to forget about me. But I didn't forget about her. I had a lot in store for her. I still hadn't planned on how I would play like she had tried to play during the first 3 months of my hiatus from my cheating fiancé. However, it had come to me as a notification for her birthday popped up on my phone screen. I was going to play her big time. Thanks to my friend, I still kept tabs on my ex-fiancé and her whereabouts and doings. She was no longer traveling the world like she was doing when we were about to get married, and there was no sign of her first lover in sight. It seemed he had also jilted her as I did. Smart man. Losing credibility in front of another man over a woman was a foolish move. Men ruled the world, not women. And I believed he had also been played too, if I recall the look on his face at the wedding. He looked like he couldn't believe his love was getting married. She had played the two of us, and she was definitely going to get what was coming for her. First up was her job. My friend had related to me that she had lost her job. I might have had something to do with that. It was just a simple submission of evidence of her neglecting her work duties and frolicking with her lover. I didn't know if that was all that it took for them to fire her from her job, but it served the purpose. She still got fired. It was, however, just the tip of the iceberg. I had planned on isolating her from her close friends and family by showing them the two-timer that she was. It just irks me that I hadn't noticed it all those times. Well, while I thought of my plan to humiliate her, I froze every access she had to my accounts. With no job, she had probably thought there was still hope with her having access to my credit cards. Lol. Not on my watch. I was going to strip away every bit of control she had. She was going to feel humiliated. Like I said earlier, the plan came to me when I got a notification of her birthday. By this time, she had already lost her job and didn't have any access to my accounts. This was the time where she'll need someone to be by her side. And it struck me. What if I become that person? And I did. I opened up new social media accounts and sent her friend requests on each one. When she had accepted my friend request, I sent her a text that said I wanted to get to know her, and that's how we started talking. However, she didn't know it was I she was talking to. My username was David, and I was from up north on my profile. I was a middle-aged banker who was looking to have a new friend. So she thought she was talking to a David, and she fell for it. As predicted. We continued chatting over the phone over the course of the year, and during one of those times I decided to drop a bomb question and ask if she had been married before. And I'm sure you've already guessed her answer to that question. Once a liar, always a liar. I had even made the question specific in case she tried to twist it. I had asked if she had been nearly married or even had a boyfriend. But my gullible ex-fiancé had lied her head off that she hadn't dated since she left college. Lol. I guess I was that quick to be forgotten. But she won't forget me for long. She would remember me soon enough. During the course of our chat, my ex-fiancé went ahead and fell in love. According to her, she had been so lonely when I had come into her life, and I knew how to treat a woman properly. In my head, she was spilling a whole lot of trash. Trash talk, because I knew the next opportunity she saw, she was going to find a way to cheat. There was a reason why I never trusted women. Even my own mother lied. I decided to play along and have fun at her expense. Our year was almost up and I needed a way to test if she was being truthful. Lol, even relating the word to anything my ex-fiancé made me want to hurl. She wasn't going to change, but I had to test her before making my plan complete. I know you all on this platform would think I'm taking it too far with her, that since I've ghosted her, I should probably move on with my life. But if I do that, my ex-fiancé was probably going to do the same thing to the next unsuspecting man that comes her way. She wasn't going to learn without a lesson being taught, and I couldn't let her go after she had taken me for granted. That wasn't going to happen. I didn't want the next person to have to plan out a revenge that I could have gotten to. Well, I wasn't going to do too much. I had left her at the altar with no repercussion, and I strongly feel she was going to pull the same stunt on David, so I had to test her out. As David, I agreed to us dating and entering into an exclusive relationship. This was how I was going to test her. A year has gone by and I decided to come back into my ex-fiancé's life, but not as the boyfriend she claimed to love, but as the groom that had jilted her at the altar. My true self. I couldn't believe my mind could be as twisted as this. Well, I couldn't have acquired so many shares in top companies without being smart. And like I said, I like to be ahead of my peers. My mind had been sharpened from an early age. I sent a text to my ex-fiancé and asked that we meet up in our usual cafe. I got there early, ahead of the scheduled time, so I would be able to see the reaction on her face when she walked in. This way, she didn't have the chance to hide the expression on her face when she saw me. And, you wouldn't guess it, Redditors, her experience was one for the books when she walked into the cafe and saw me. It was pure shock before she hid her emotions. She had thought I was done with her. She didn't know the game was just beginning with me, and I intended to have my fun. We talked, asking each other how we've been for the past year, and I once again asked her if there was anyone in her life at the moment, and of course she lied once again. At the moment, I began thinking if she could easily slip out lies like that, it meant she had been lying to me throughout our whole relationship. Then I dropped the bomb. I told her I wanted to go ahead with the wedding. I had shocked my ex-fiancé twice within an hour. But she didn't refuse my proposal. She had even looked excited at the idea of being a bride again. She was so predictable. The little witch was as predictable as they come, and I was sick of it. My plan was falling into place, Redditors. She had fallen for the trap, and I wasn't going to hold back in showing her people how she had been while we were engaged to be married. And this time she was doing it again. I told you all she wasn't going to change if she wasn't called out or taught a lesson. This was someone that had confessed her love to David before meeting with me, and she was accepting to wear my ring again. Trying to dupe the two of us at the same time once again. Do you guys know she even had the audacity to ask me why I had left her at the altar? She had the mind to ask why I didn't want to marry her then, and now I wanted to marry her. The way she put it, like she thought I was mad, but at least I wanted her in my madness. She probably thought she was so likable that I came back begging after a year later. I didn't deem her worthy of a response. She could think whatever she wanted. Well, We began planning the wedding. I told her it was to be in 2 weeks and she was to plan everything by herself. That was her punishment for leaving me to plan the last wedding. By the end of the 2 weeks, I fixed a meeting as David with her. Our very first meeting to celebrate 9 months of getting to know each other. Throughout the 2 weeks it took to plan another fake wedding, she didn't even show she was in love with another man or she was having conversations with another man. She treated me like an egg, all loving and caring and disgusting. You needed to be there to witness the change in her character. But I knew what was behind the facade. I couldn't be fooled twice. Heck, I couldn't even be fooled once, but I had slipped up and had paid for it. Now it was time for her to pay all she had done. The day of the wedding came and we exchanged our vows in front of the fake priest whom I had hired to oversee the ceremony. I had also faked my signature on the marriage certificate because there was no way I was getting married to the lying witch, not even by mistake. Time for the reception and my wife had suddenly disappeared from her bridal suite. Of course I knew where she was. She was planning on meeting up with David at the very same hotel. I had arranged it so the meeting would happen in the very same place my wedding reception was supposed to be happening. I had even hired a guy to act as David, all to catch her in the act. Everyone began looking for the bride and I got a call that she was in the room. I connected my phone to a projector in the wedding reception hall where our guests were already seated. My ex-fiance's face came on the screen with the guy I had hired to be David, and her words were loud enough for everyone to hear. She confessed her love to David on screen in front of all the guests we had invited, and I could finally breathe. Everything had come into play. My guests began murmuring immediately and the projector was disconnected. I sent people to go fetch my wife for our reception. The amount of fun I was having, you all needed to see how everything had played out. My ex-fiancée decided to grace the reception hall, not knowing the disgrace she had brought upon herself. Once she entered, I connected my phone to the projector that was supposed to be showing goodwill messages from our friends and family towards our marriage and showed the evidence of her cheating on me before our wedding day. Luckily, I hadn't invited my family to this second disaster of a wedding. It was only my few friends I had invited and left the remainder of the guest list up to her. So the hall was filled to the brim with her people witnessing what a two-timer she was. I decided to replay her conversation in the hotel room with David again, and watched how the color drained from her face with shock. That color was the color of sweet victory. Next time she wasn't going to try to play men, and if she did, her friends would surely call her out on it. One thing was for certain, she wasn't going to be getting married again anytime soon, at least not in front of this crowd that had just witnessed her true colors. Except she moved to a different country. My ex-fiance's life was totally ruined in front of the people she called her family and friends. I took the fake wedding certificate and tore it in front of her. I walked up to her and showed her the chats. I showed her that I was the Dave she was supposed to meet at the hotel room. I even showed her the recent texts of her telling me to wait until later that night before we could meet. I wondered how she had planned to sneak out of the house on our wedding night when she had sent the text. But I guess nothing could ever stop a two-timer from showing her ways. However, I had dealt her a big lesson that she was surely not going to forget in a long time. If she was, and I hope she was going to stop playing mind games with people. After that day, I never heard from my ex-fiancée again, and I was happy and content that I had played the player. Hey Redditors, I hope you've gotten to learn a thing or two from my experience. I know some of you would think I had gone a little too extreme in dealing with my ex-fiancée, but I have come across people like her more than once or twice in my lifetime. These category of people won't stop until they've been dealt a harsh blow that throws them back into reality. My ex-fiancée thought she was sleek and smart so she could play mind games with anyone. The lesson would serve as a reminder anytime she wants to try it again. Plus, I am now happy with myself from removing myself from her evil claws. It hadn't been a fun experience knowing I was being played for a fool by someone I wanted to marry, but now the experience has made me more self-aware when it comes to dealing with people, male or female. Thank you for sharing in my experience, and I really hope this doesn't happen to you too. Have a lovely day, Redditors.
I've always heard that the walls have ears, but I'm only beginning to realize just how true that is. Keeping your marriage private and not sharing personal information with people is really underrated. I've come to understand that I've been a fool for a very long time, and now I've been served divorce papers. I talked trash about my husband with my best friend because he picked a fight with his boss and got fired from work. But now, a lot of things are falling apart in my marriage. Both of them ended up backstabbing me and betraying me without me even realizing it. I should have never trusted my best friend so much that I didn't think twice before telling her something so personal. I never intended to start talking trash about my husband, but the circumstances led me to do it. He lost his job, and we had to go through a lot. It was a lot of pent-up anger from everything that happened that led me to take my family problems to my best friend. I don't know where to start, guys, but as a woman, I'm sure that I'm not the only one who gossips with my best friend. Well, I'm definitely sure that I'll be the only one to regret it this much. My name is Josephina, and I'm a 27-year-old nurse. I've been married to my husband, Nathaniel, for the past 4 years now. My husband is just 1 year older than me, if you're wondering. He's 28 years old. My husband worked at a tech company, but he lost his job recently. He lost his job because he got into a big fight with his boss at work. Yes, guys, my husband lost his job because he let his anger get the best of him. It's not every day your husband suddenly comes back from work, barely 4 hours after leaving, and then he tells you that he lost his job. I almost had a heart attack when I heard him tell me that. It was very difficult to understand why that suddenly happened to my husband. I had a lot of questions to ask him that day, but I chose to keep quiet. I didn't want to burden him with questions because I assumed that he was also feeling bad for what happened to him. I decided to give him some time to get over it. I won't even lie. I was practically dying in silence because I had to suppress my urge to scream out loud. We have 2 children together, and I had to worry about them. I have a boy and a girl, and they are 4 years and 2 years old, respectively. I got pregnant before we got married. If you're wondering how we have a 4-year-old already, lol. After 2 days of giving him time to cool off, I sat my husband down and demanded answers. I asked him why he lost his job and what happened. He just told me that his company decided to shed their workers because they were going through financial problems and blah, blah, blah. He kept using all these big grammars about tech and whatnot. I'm a nurse, and I'm the perfect definition of a nerd. I do not have any knowledge about tech companies and how they function. So, I believed everything Nathaniel said to me. I mean, all I know how to do is care for patients and treat them when necessary. I have no idea about companies shedding workers because of fundings. Those were the lies Nathaniel told me, and I believed them all. I didn't care to investigate or ask questions. I can't be alone when I say it's highly unusual that a wife would sit down and guess her husband decided to pick up a fight with his boss at work. That's not a common occurrence, and my mind did not even go there at all. It was very difficult to keep up weeks after my husband lost his job. We had 2 kids to cater for, and my salary was barely enough to do anything. I earn almost the same amount of money my husband earns, but it became difficult to shoulder the responsibility myself. Before, we would split the responsibilities and use our salaries to cater for the family together. But it became very difficult to do that as time went on because I was doing everything alone. At first, we didn't really feel it because my husband and I had some savings together. But months or even weeks after that, the savings finished and were depending solely on my salary. It was difficult to maintain the apartment we lived in because of the high electricity and water bill. So guys, we had no choice than to move from our former apartment. I won't lie that it was not a difficult decision to make. To move from a good apartment to a lower one just because you couldn't afford it is not the best feeling in the world. But we had to make the decision because it was very difficult to spend that much money on an apartment when we were barely able to pay our legal fees. I got very frustrated that I had to go through that with my family. I don't know how to put it, but it is not exactly the most ideal situation in the world. It's harder to live a difficult life when you have had it a little bit easier before. When I found out my husband lost his job, it was a very big deal, and I felt very defeated because I knew that it was not going to be easy to keep up. But I always assured myself that it was just a temporary thing. I thought he would get another job in at most a month's time. I didn't think we would go 3 months with only me catering for the family. As time went on, I began to get very irritated. I started asking my husband why he was not searching for a job. I held out for a long time and did not want to bring up the discussion because I knew that his ego would be hurt. I have no choice then to finally speak up because the frustration was too much. My instincts were not wrong because the moment I brought the topic up, my husband practically flared. I am not even exaggerating, guys. Is the absolute truth, and that is why I got even angrier. Just like I predicted, his ego was very hurt. He accused me of trying to shame him in his toughest moments. Yes, my husband really said that to me. He victimized himself and made me out to be a bad person. Even though I know many people will be against me for saying this, I'll still say it because I am being honest here. I don't think it's fair that men get angry at their wives when the woman has a problem with them losing their job. I know some women are housewives and they don't really work. My situation was different because before and after I met my husband, I worked. I think it's not okay to get angry at your partner when they demand reasons for your unemployment. I know some of those men are not at fault and they are just victims of the circumstances. But I don't think it's unreasonable for a woman to have a problem with having her family suffer. It's just as simple as this. I would have never married you if I knew that I would have to change my children to a much lower school because we can't afford their school fees anymore. I had to do that with my 2 children, and it was a very hard decision to make. Nathaniel got very angry and he went as far as swearing at me. I get that he has a right to be angry about my approach. But I don't think there's any person on earth who will not have a problem with having their husband unemployed for that long. If you don't say it, you certainly think about it, and I was no different. I didn't even want to offend him at first. I just wanted to know why he wasn't searching for a job. Maybe he had been doing so secretly by then, but I never saw him going out to look for a job. Nathaniel was very angry when I brought up the topic, and he literally left the house immediately. I felt bad immediately because I thought that I had done something wrong. I waited for him to come back, but he didn't come home till it was very late in the evening. Even when Nathaniel came home, he didn't want to talk to me, so I took it upon myself to get to the bottom of everything. Before Nathaniel lost his job, we didn't really have any problems in our marriage. We have always been a respectful couple and respect each other a lot. Apart from the financial crisis that came with him using his job, there were also crises that started showing up in the marriage, so I decided to get to the bottom of it. I also noticed that Nathaniel did not like it any time I brought up his former company and how ruthless they were. I always tried bringing up conversation about what could have possibly made this company choose him instead of any other employee. Nathaniel always swept my conversations under the rock, and he never engaged me in any of them. Eventually, I really began to read into it, and I began to question why Nathaniel found it hard to talk about his former company. I know you guys are thinking that I'm a nosy woman who couldn't just mind my business. Well, I had no choice than to intervene because a lot had been going on, and I was tired of it. I needed answers, so I decided to speak to my mother about it and asked for her opinion. I didn't directly tell her Nathaniel lost his job because I'd kept it a secret from her. Nathaniel had warned me not to tell my parents because he didn't want to feel embarrassed or get any help from them. I understood his desire to keep his male ego, so I did not tell my parents about it. I just lied to my mother and said a friend of mine told me her husband lost his job and asked her advice. I also told her everything that I've been going on, but I did not personalize it. Thankfully, my mother did not read into any of it, and she did not understand that I was actually the one seeking advice indirectly. She just told me that it was best to find out if my friend's husband was the only one who had gotten sacked from his previous job, and then inquire about everything. I actually found our advice very helpful and realized that I had been a big fool for not making further inquiry. I instantly regretted just blindly taking my husband's word, and so I decided to find out the truth on my own. I didn't know any of his colleagues directly, but I knew someone who worked as a cleaner at his former workplace. I got to know her because she usually came to the clinic I work at for checkups. I decided to ask her if my husband was the only one that stopped coming to work. She just told me that she was not sure, but she knew that he was the only one whose desk had been empty for a long time. A part of me knew that there was no way it was only my husband that got sacked by the company if they wanted to shed employees. I knew that there had to be more to that story, but I just didn't know how to get the truth out of him. I was also aware that my husband would never tell me the truth himself. That's why I decided to use other means. I decided to go to my husband's old company myself and find out what had been going on. I know I sound crazy, and to be honest, I was really scared of doing that. I didn't know what to expect, and the possibility of things going wrong made me scared. I know I sound like I'm exaggerating, but just me, that's the truth. I also didn't want to make my husband angry in case he found out I went to his old company. Well, even though I was really worried and scared, I ended up going to the company because my curiosity was getting the best of me. I was also going through financial troubles, lol. I needed to find all the truth. When I went to the company and asked to see some of his colleagues, I was received very coldly, and not everybody really wanted to speak to me. That was weird because I did not get why they were being rude when I had never interacted with any of them physically before. The only person that really agreed to have a conversation with me was a lady who seemed to work in the same department as my husband. She just pulled me to the side and told me to follow her so we could have some coffee. I was really surprised, but my curiosity did not make me leave. I followed her to have the coffee, and that was when I found out the real truth. Yes, guys, I discovered that my husband had been lying to me for a very long time. The fact that I never even imagined the possibility of him lying is crazy. I didn't really expect to find out anything substantial when I went to the company. I just wanted to fix my curiosity and clear my doubts, but I ended up finding out that my husband got fired because he picked up a fight with boss at work. I was very embarrassed to hear that because I had never imagined my husband would do something like that. I kept thinking that it made no sense that he would risk our financial life and kids' future just because of a fight. What also made no sense was the fact that he decided to lie to me about it. That just explained the truth and proved my suspicions right. I decided to ask her what the fight had been about, but she consistently told me that she did not know. I thanked her and left the company after not being able to get more information out of her. I'll be very honest, guys, it was very difficult for me to just stay home and pretend like I didn't know the real truth and why my husband got fired from his job. It was hard for me to play dumb whenever he brought up the topic and assured me that he was looking for a job. I didn't want to tell him the truth that I had gone to his company because I knew that would have caused a fight between us. I just knew that he would never really accept the fact that I went behind his back and visited the same company that he claimed to have fired him. Weeks after that, Nathaniel was still unemployed, and it seriously got on my nerves. When I didn't know the truth, I was really patient with him, but knowing the truth did not make me patient at all. I blamed him for everything, and I believed that he was the reason everyone was suffering. I didn't see things from his perspective anymore, and I began to snap at him at every given chance. It was so constant that Nathaniel also noticed it, and he called me out on it. He accused me of treating him differently because of his financial troubles. I made it clear to him that that was not the reason, and that even though I was not happy with the fact that he was unemployed, what made me more upset was the discovery I'd made. I couldn't hold it in any longer, guys, and that's why I finally told him the truth. I tried to avoid it for a very long time, but it was hard to keep it to myself. Just like I expected, Nathaniel was very angry, and he didn't take it easy with me at all. It was a very heated argument, and the both of us said a lot of hurtful things to each other. I kept asking him why he chose to lie to me, and why he wasn't honest with me. Nathaniel also kept asking me why I decided to go behind his back and make the inquiry instead of trusting his words. It was just an argument filled with allocating blame and trying to make the other person the villain. Nothing good came out of the argument, so I decided to ask Nathaniel questions the next day. I asked him why he chose to lie to me and why he decided to pick a fight with his boss. He just told me that I would never truly understand his reasons and that he was not ready to tell me the truth yet. That was all he said to me before he left the house that day. According to him, he had to go and look for a job. What happened that day was the straw that broke the camel's back for me, and I knew that I could not handle bottling everything up any longer. I finally decided to go talk to my best friend about it because I thought she was a trustworthy person who would listen to me and honestly give out her opinion. A problem shared is a problem half solved, and that was the mentality I used to give myself courage to speak to my best friend about it. I just wanted to vent a little, but I never expected my venting spree to lead to another series of problems. I never imagined that my best friend would backstab me as much as she did, and that too with the help of my husband. And 3 months ago, I went to meet my best friend at her house. I told her that I urgently needed to speak to her, or else I'd run crazy. Reddit, I was very vulnerable, and that's the only reason I decided to run to my best friend for help. She didn't have a problem with me meeting up with her at all, and was very cool with me coming over. She even prepared lunch for me and made sure I was extremely comfortable. She asked me what had been on my mind and why I was suddenly desperate to talk to her. I just started venting and telling her how irresponsible my husband had been recently. I left no stone unturned, and I told her everything without leaving details out. If you all remember, I implied that I talked trash about my husband. That is true because I didn't paint him in a bad light at all. I just told my best friend how frustrated I'd been because Nathaniel was making life very difficult for me. My best friend's name is Flora, and she has been my best friend for 10 years. Well, now, I don't think I'm going to refer to Flora as my best friend anymore. She's no longer close to me, and I literally don't want to have anything to do with her. She listened to me rant for hours, and she tried her best to calm me down. She even joined in and talked trash about Nathaniel, too. She told me my feelings were valid, and that I did nothing wrong. It felt good to hear that, and it also felt good to tell someone everything that I'd been going through. I was relieved to get the weight off my chest and felt a lot lighter. I was even grateful to Flora for giving me a listening ear and accommodating me in her home. Prior to Nathaniel losing his job and I went to speak to Flora, I'd never told her how much my husband earned as a tech guy. I'd never seen a reason to tell her that. But on that particular day, I got carried away and mentioned Nathaniel's salary somewhere in the conversation. It slipped off, and I didn't think it was a big deal because he no longer had his job. I got home that day feeling a little better that I'd spoken to Flora. I really liked the fact that she reassured me and told me that I did nothing wrong. Not once in our conversation did Flora ever advise me to get things to work with me and Nathaniel. I never saw that as a red flag, but I'm only beginning to realize that I should have noticed that something was off. I just blindly followed everything she said because I was looking for someone to reaffirm me and tell me that I was doing like them. Now I honestly regret the fact that I kept everything from my parents and my real family. I should have never listened to my Nathaniel and kept the truth away from my parents. If my mother had known the truth, she would have given me honest advice. I am also to blame for taking my problems to Flora instead of doing the right thing. Listen to me, guys. No matter what happens, never take your personal issues to your best friend, no matter how close you think you both are. No one is ever truly going to have your back like you and your blood family. In case you are all wondering how Flora backstabbed me, I'll just tell you as clearly as possible. Flora went behind my back and had an affair with my husband. In other words, I am trying to say that Nathaniel and Flora had a secret relationship behind my back. I can't even stop my tears from falling right now because I am beyond embarrassed and disappointed in myself for trusting the wrong person. The person I called my best friend for 10 good years used my weakness against me and decided to hit on my husband just because we were having issues in our marriage. If that honestly doesn't scream disrespect, then I don't know what does. If not for a very good Samaritan, I would have never even found out in the first place, and I would have been left to believe lies. I found out in the most coincidental way possible, and it took me a lot not to lose my mind. It's not every day that you find out that your own best friend has been backstabbing you. Nathaniel cheated on me with Flora, and she is the one that made the move. I don't even care who made the move first. That man just played me. No matter what he says I did to him or how I made him feel uncomfortable, no woman would have shouldered the responsibility of the house for many months while he was unemployed, and the best way he could pay me back was cheat on me. Because I was not ready to take his unemployed state, he chose to pay me back by betraying me. I am not saying I am not wrong in this situation, or I do not have a hand in what happened, but wow. How could a man that has been tolerated and fed by his wife turn around and cheat on her because he could not take a few hard words? Even before I was told that Nathaniel and Flora were having an affair, I noticed a lot of changes in Nathaniel. He started coming home late and leaving early, even though I knew that he was unemployed. I didn't notice at first because I was busy working at the clinic and didn't have lots of free time. But I started to get hints from the children. I would not like to mention my children's name because I want to keep the identity private. One day I got back from work, and my son told me he had been alone with his sister for some time and was very happy to see me. I asked him if his daddy was not at home, and he told me that Nathaniel had been living in the house frequently and told them that he was going out for work. I was very shocked because I always believed that Nathaniel had been home, and he never told me that they got a new job. I confronted him because I never wanted to try butter things up. Nathaniel just brushed it off and told me he had been job hunting. I didn't believe him, and I asked him why he had been job hunting for months. His lies were becoming predictable and hideous, and I was tired of trying to believe him. Nathaniel ignored all my rants. At some point, he stopped eating the food I cooked and stopped using my money. I would ask him why he was doing that, and he told me that he was not interested in spending any of my money. Sometimes he would even say that he hoped I could leave him alone and stop ranting because he was no longer interested in my money. There was even one day that he searched me down and told me that I had been very rude just because he lost his job. I tried making understand that I had been patient with him enough, and that it was only a matter of time before I eventually got frustrated. He just made an illustration that he would have never treated me that way if I was the one that lost my job. He told me that I barely earned any money and that his salary had been supporting the family for the past 4 years. Nathaniel said he earned way more than me when he had a job, and that I had no right to brook shame him. After saying all those things to me, he told me to stop providing for the house, and that he would now pay the bills and pay for the children's school fees. I asked him where he got the money from, and he told me that it was none of my business. He finished by saying he hoped I would drop his name and stop spreading rumors about him since he now took over the responsibilities from me. That really hit a spot, because I got very self-conscious and wondered how he knew that I had spoken to someone about him. I began to suspect something was up because I'd never insinuated that I spoke to anyone about what had been going on in my marriage. He even generalized it and accused me of spreading rumors about him to anyone that cared to listen. Yes, guys, he really said that. And that just goes to say that Flora had lied to him and said that I had been spreading lies about him. I tried to make Nathaniel expatiate on what he was saying, but he did not give me time to speak. Barely 1 week ago, we moved back into our old apartment. Nathaniel footed the bills and got us back into their apartment. Luckily, no one had moved in yet. I kept asking Nathaniel where he got the money from and how he was able to get us back to the old apartment, but he stopped talking to me completely and only spoke to me when it regarded the children. It was like I was not even married anymore, and I was just leaving with a friend who did not even speak to me. All my efforts to start a conversation and get us to talk were all in vain. I even asked him once if he had seen a job, but he brushed it off and told me it was none of my business again. I know you are thinking that it was not a big deal, and that I had gotten all I wanted and he had a job. But if he had money, and my marriage was not the same, I don't see the essence because I was practically living with a robot who only spoke to me at intervals. So just 2 weeks ago, I got a call from Flora's neighbor. Her name is Andrea, and I am quite cordial with her. Whenever I visit, I say hi to her, and I even used to share food with her whenever I brought some food for Flora. She called me over to a place and told me she had something very important to say to me. She made it clear that she did not want me to tell Flora about it and that I was only allowed to come when Flora was at work. I found that very weird and confusing, but I got really curious and decided to go and see what she had to say. I was aware of Flora's work schedule, so I was able to make it there when Flora was still at work. I even had work that day, but I had to switch my shift with a friend of mine at work. My curiosity made me do a night shift that day, but I was not even able to do the night shift after I found out what Flora and Nathaniel had been up to. Andrea told me that Flora had been receiving a particular guest constantly for weeks. I was very surprised, but I did not really know how that had anything to do with me. At first, I didn't get why she called me over just to tell me that Flora had been having a particular guest coming over for weeks. But Andrea shocked me by telling me that the guest Flora had been having over constantly was my husband. I couldn't even believe my ears, and I found it hard to understand what she was saying for a very long time. To say I was shocked would be an honest understatement. I even got angry with Andrea and got up from where I sat. I told her it was disrespectful for her to just speak about my husband like that. I was very angry with her, and I even tried to work out. But Andrea did not change her words. She told me she was completely serious, and when I asked her for proof, she just told me that she had seen my husband with my children, and that was how she knew that the guy was my husband. I know that I have never introduced my husband to Andrea because I never invited him over to Flora's house. She told me that she has been seeing the guy constantly but did not know who he was. Andrea saw my husband on the road with my 2 kids, and that was how she knew that it was my husband who had been frequenting Flora's house. It finally made sense, and I believed her because I had introduced my children to her many times before whenever I brought them to Flora's place. I was so angry that I ran out of her house and did not even wait for her to finish speaking. I went to the house and met my husband there. I grabbed his shirt and asked him if he had been visiting Flora all these while without my knowledge. Nathaniel did not even try to deny everything I had said. He said it was true, and that I was the one to blame. The man who cheated on me was accusing me of being the one to blame. Nathaniel told me that he made a mistake by marrying me because I was the type of moment to back about feeding her family. I asked him where all those thoughts were coming from, and that was how he told me that he found out. I have been talking about him to too many people. That's when I realized that Flora had snitched on me and told my husband everything I said. But without being honest, I was very angry and I was about to scream in my lungs, but I had to calm down because our children were in their house. Nathaniel was very indifferent, and even when I tried to explain to him that Flora lied to him, he told me he preferred a woman who stood by him when he was broke and helped him look for a job at another company than a woman like me who only brought his flaws. The man that I am taking over the responsibility of the house from said that to me. Nathaniel left the house before I could even sweat a word, and he has not come back home for the past 2 weeks. She only came to see the children, eat, and grab a change of clothes. I had gone to Flora's place to confront her, and she locked me out of the house. Every single day for the past 2 weeks, I have tried to go to her workplace and confront her, but she has avoided me successfully. I got another shock yesterday when Nathaniel came over and gave me the divorce papers. I feel like a fool, and at the same time I feel like the villain and the victim. I should have never spoken to my best friend and talked trash about my husband. But I don't think it's fair that this is how Nathaniel chooses to pay me after months of having his back. I'm already dressed to go to my parents' place and tell them everything that has been happening in person. I spoke to them over the phone, and they were very devastated, so they asked me to come over so they could speak to me. I'll make an update to this post and tell you all how everything went. Update. Thank you for reading my story and dropping your comments. I'll just try my best to get straight to the point now because this is a very delicate subject for me, and I feel vulnerable writing about it. It's been 6 months now, and I recently got divorced from Nathaniel. After speaking to my parents, they were very angry and they gave me hours of lectures. They told me that I had just had the fire myself by keeping everything from them and trusting a Flora instead of them. They spoke to one of my brothers, and he was the one that helped me catch Flora. I asked him to help me follow her secretly and tell me exactly where she was. That was how I was able to see her and have a conversation with her. I won't even lie to you guys. It was not a conversation at all. It was a confrontation, and it led to me almost making her bald. I didn't give her a chance to speak before I pounced on her and started scratching her with my nails. I injured her so much that my brother had to intervene and drag me away from her. I called her a betrayer and cursed her. She just laughed in my face and called me a fool. She told me that since I had a problem with my husband, she decided to have him for herself. I discovered that Flora had gone behind my back to tell lies to my husband, then help him get a job. My husband saw this as a big deal, so he left me. She was saying so many hurtful things that my brother had to drag me away from there. He told me that there was no need for me to listen to her for my own mental health and that I had hurt her enough. The betrayal stung a lot, and I don't think I'll ever be able to trust anybody anymore. Before I signed the divorce paper Nathaniel sent to me, I asked him the real reason he started to fight with his boss. He told me that his boss had been secretly cutting off a salary for months and that when you found out, he just got very angry and could not control himself. I cannot believe that Nathaniel preferred his ego to having a proper conversation with his boss. You could have just confronted his boss and requested a refund, but he decided to pick a fight and lose his job. I don't care what anyone says, but even though I am at fault, and 90% of the issues were as a result of my impatience and gullible nature, I still stood by Nathaniel in his toughest moment. I just got tired like everyone else, and it took a toll on me. Anyone else in my position would have done the same thing. I got tired of shouldering the responsibilities, and that's normal. I should have never taken my marital problems to my best friend and talked trash about my husband. I also should have never rubbed his incapability in his face. For all those things, I take full responsibility. But everything else that happened was just pure betrayal and deceit. Nathaniel and I got joint custody of the kids, and he's the one in charge of paying for the apartment we currently live in. He's also the one paying for the children's school fees and health care. Nathaniel and Flora are now in a relationship, and they are living together. Well, I am divorced now, and I hope that Flora and Nathaniel will have a very bad life. I do not care for any of them anymore. That's the awful thing that happened to me as a result of blindly trusting people. I hope someone out there learns from my mistake and doesn't make the same bad mistakes I made.